Hi friends, I hope everyone's doing well. In my last video, I created these watercolor pattern papers that I wanted to use for collaging. The natural next step is to actually create the collages. When I brought out these papers, I noticed that I only had one that I would consider to be a dark value, so I painted a few more. I like to have all three values in my collages. I'll go over the other supplies in each collage section, so let's get started. Here are the papers I pulled for the first collage. As usual, I pulled more papers than I'll probably use. Before I pull papers, I decide on a color palette to help me to narrow the selection. Quick reminder that it's a good idea to draw a line that's 1/8 to 1/4 inches from the gutter if you're working in a journal. You don't want to collage to the gutter. Papers can wrinkle or get damaged when you close the journal. Also, I'll be using a glue stick to adhere all the papers in this collage session. When deciding on the composition for the collages, I looked over the 2 basic composition videos that I created to see which ones I rarely use. Those are the compositions that I'll be using for this video. I'll link those 2 videos in the description area if you haven't watched them and want to take a look. This first collage will have a curvilinear composition. Typically when I collage, I glue elements after I cut them. For this collage, I was unsure if I wanted to paint the ground. I'm working on each element first and decide on the placement, then decide if I want to paint the ground. Each element will have multiple papers on top with different patterns, colors, shape. Since there'll only be 3 large elements on this simple collage, I want to make sure there's enough interesting details. And as always, I'm being mindful of a good balance of light, mid, and dark value papers. I'm at a good stopping point to decide if the ground needs to be painted. Since the collage has elements that are leaning light to mid-tone, I think a dark ground will add a good contrasting element. I brought out Blake's matte acrylic paint in black and dark blue light, and a 1-inch flat brush. I went back and forth about painting an ombre or a solid ground. As you will see, I decided on a solid dark blue ground. I didn't have the color blue that I wanted in a bottle, so I decided to mix it. This may be common knowledge, but I want to mention it. If you're darkening a paint color, it's a good idea to gradually add the darker paint color, in this case black, to the color you want to darken, which is the dark blue light. After the paint on the ground dried, I laid out the elements one final time before gluing each one down to make sure the elements and the composition is what I want. Two of the elements needed a slight trim. To my eyes, the one in the upper left had too much of the light orange splatter paper showing. It didn't look balanced. The element on the lower left had too much of the white and blue paper overlapping on top of the larger element on the right. Both are slight changes, but to me it helped the overall look of the collage. I thought this collage was finished, but this area right here needed a darker element to balance the collage. I'm cutting a bit of this black and red watercolor pattern paper for this area. Now this simple curvilinear collage is finished. Let's go on to the next one. Here are the papers for the next collage. It will have a meandering composition. I decided not to paint the ground. The design idea that I have in mind will cover most of the page. The section of the page that won't be covered with pattern paper will just be the blank page showing through. Typically, I either paint the whole substrate first or cover it completely with collage papers so no unmarked paper is showing. This dark purple paper that's being collaged first will take up most of the ground layer. All of the elements from this paper will be the largest ones in this collage. Again, I want to be mindful of varying the sizes and shapes along with having contrast. The next layers will have elements that are thinner and lighter in value than this first layer. Here's the finished meandering collage. It's cohesive due to the color combination. It has a good balance of light, mid, and dark values. There's only a small amount of the unmarked page showing through. For the next collage, I want more of it showing. Let's go on to that one. These are the papers I selected for the final collage that will have an overlapping frame composition. With this type of composition, I typically like to build it in layers using one paper design per layer. I think it helps the design of the collage not to look too busy. As I mentioned in the previous section, I'm letting more of the blank page remain visible. As with the previous collages, I'm being mindful of having light, mid, and dark value papers, also papers in different sizes and shapes. This composition lends itself to having elements with the center of the paper removed, like a frame. You'll see these elements in a bit. Here's the finished overlapping frames composition collage. Even though I used a lot of papers for this collage, it doesn't look too busy. I attribute that to leaving some of the unmarked page visible. Also cutting out the inside some of the shapes so they're frames, not solid shapes. I hope you enjoyed and learned something from this video. Let me know if you have any questions. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to watch it. Take care.